Hey guys, welcome back to Faith Reframed. My name is Jesse. Here we try to help you reframe your faith rather than lose it, be it through apologetics, through discourse with different faiths, with different denominations. We're just trying to help you, rather than lose your faith, address maybe the bad theology or the bad understandings to help you have a good, strong faith you can hold on to. So before we go any further, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe, like, share. If you appreciate having Christian content on YouTube, or if you just appreciate what's going on this channel, take a minute to subscribe. I really appreciate it. So, okay, what we're going over today is Elijah Stevens. Many of you may be aware of who Elijah Stevens is. If you're not, he is the producer, director, writer of the documentary Send Proof. He made his rounds on Remnant Radio a couple years back, did a lot of interviews, and is a Bethel alumni. Quite the interesting story, and recently he did an interview with none other than Mike Winger. If you're familiar with what Mike Winger's been doing lately, he's been covering a lot of these, I won't say scandals, but I mean just problems that have been going on in the church, particularly in the charismatic church. Now, what's unique about Elijah and we have quite a few similarities, and he is still a huge, I guess you'd say, an advocate for Bethel or a proponent of their theology. And he still agrees with much of their theology, while I don't. But our backgrounds are very similar in the sense of that we're both alumni. We both spent quite a few time there, and he still has been. He even taught there. Wasn't a staff member, but an empowered leader. And quite the background. So what we're going over is the video, and it's a 3-hour long video. And I don't want to make a 3-hour long video, but I want to go over the main points that stuck out to me and really break down how Elijah has done an incredible job surgically responding to the issues at hand. So let's start with what is the problem, what happened, and I'll give a quick synopsis of that. Essentially, Elijah Stevens made this documentary called Send Proof. I've seen it. It's about documenting miracles, proving miracles are real. Think finger of God, but more evidentiary and not just claims and testimonies, but wanting to have all the proof. Now, Elijah at the time was going to Bethel in communication with Bethel leaders, and he made this documentary because of Sean Bowles. And Sean Bowles gave a prophetic word, which come to find out that prophetic word was because he found it on Facebook. All 8 details. Now, he moved forward with making this video. It drained his life savings, pulled out retirement, everything, you name it. He's a veteran, really tapped into every resource he can to make this video. Come to find out, Sean was lying, and Bethel knew about it. Bethel knew that Sean Bowles was a liar, a prophetic fraud, and and Elijah, we talk about quite a few times how people have made life-altering decisions off these prophetic words. Elijah's one of those people, and this is at another level. Not because it's just some random person that, maybe moved somewhere or married someone or did something. This guy took off work. I think it was for 6 years to make this documentary, crowdfunded, left his job, went all in. Like, he stewarded the word well, as some may say. And in the end, with Sean being a fraud, wasn't the biggest hurt. It was the fact that Bethel knew about it before he even finished it, didn't tell him, didn't support him, let him move forward with it, and kind of got pie on his face in some ways. So this is Elijah talking with Mike about that. And then not only that, but then Elijah confronting Bethel. So going straight Matthew 18 in many ways to Bethel about some of their theology as a Bethel insider, as a Bethel leader, as someone teaching Bethel classes. Him confronting Bethel, not someone like me who's an outside critic who was inside. He's a current inside critic criticizing. And so we're going to tackle some of these things and what's interesting about it and provide some commentary and frame up what's going on here. So let's jump into this first clip. We have quite a few to cover, but I'm going to try to make this as succinct and as digestible as you can and really push people back to obviously the full 3-hour video. Now, this first one is about physics of heaven. And really all the problems that Elijah has found. This is 44 minutes into the video. So the first bit's just him kind of giving his testimony background. But I wanted to jump in at this point because he really talks about his problem, physics of heaven, and how as an apologist, so he's trained in apologetics from Biola, quite the impressive pedigree. This is one of the things that many people brought up. And he's like, I can't really defend this. And so he brought it up to the author and actually put an email together. And this was his response to Bethel in regard to physics of heaven and as a constructive criticism, what they should do to help take care of this. And I just thought this was honestly really incredible what he was willing to do. So let's take a listen to it.
Let's get Judy, meet with my wife. We can, or set up a meeting, and we can set them up. Her with quantum physicist, New Age apologist. I go through the book, give tons of recommendations, and and I go, here's 5 teachers I would have her listen to and kind of help recraft the book. So this is Bethel
this
culture.
Is what you said in the beginning of our discussion. You're trying to call, this is you all the time. You're trying to say, hey, this isn't over. Let's call for change. Let's call for a reformation in this area.
Yeah.
Let's just fix it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the emails went nowhere.
So he confronted Bethel directly, trying to figure out what to do with this book, Physics of Heaven, which is one of the first big videos I had that Mike shared and really helped me get a lot of people seeing my channel. But, Elijah was on the inside trying to provide an honest critique and trying to help the book. Now, Bethel has had lots of critiques on this book, and even with someone on the inside bringing good responses, good resources, and wanting to help, they were still stubborn to not change it and not move forward. Now, I don't want to belabor this too much, but just as we go through these timestamps, just recognize and see how much Elijah is trying to help. The guy, you got to give him credit, whether I theologically agree or disagree with him. I do disagree with him for the most part in a lot of these stances. But what a blessing to have. Like if I was a pastor and I had someone like this in my church who was bringing resources and things to help me correct bad teaching in my church, this would be a huge blessing, someone we want to hold on to. We're going to find throughout this that is not what Bethel did. So this clip is right after, it's the 30 minute mark. It's right after Mike Winger shows a demonstration of someone who's basically a Christian witch. And Elijah's whole point is how the theology of Bethel is pushing people to this point where you're blurring the lines of New Age mysticism and occultism and Christianity. And it's because of books like Physics of Heaven that this is happening. And Elijah's take on this is just a great take. And I wanted you guys to hear, they played that clip, and you can watch the whole video, but they play this clip of this self-proclaimed prophet who loves Jesus, but who's also a witch. And this is in context of Physics of Heaven. And here's Elijah's response to it.
My personal belief is if you don't police the boundaries between the New Age and Christianity and make it absolutely clear, in 5 to 10 years, the charismatic movement's going that direction because they're always looking for the new thing.
Right there. There's more to this, but even just that, if you don't police the boundaries and make clear that people are going to keep looking for the new thing. And that's what we're seeing happening. And we've been levying these critiques. I've been levying these critiques. People like Kozar, like Roseborough, Daniel Long, Melissa Dowdery, all these people have been levying these critiques, and they keep getting brushed off. It's like, well, you just don't understand. It's frustrating when I hear that because I do understand. I was there. But let's take it a step further. Here's someone who's not just was there, but is there. And he's even saying this. And it's because of the books like Physics of Heaven. And so essentially that if we don't clear this up, if we don't show that this is what, the faith should look like versus this is what the occult is, and make clear lines, that the occult will take over. And that's kind of the point he's taking here. There's more to it.
And also inside of, let's say, a Bethel Kingdom Now theology, what happens is you get people who believe, well, if a miracle's not happening, it's not on God's end. And so we've got to figure out how to get access to miracles. And so either you go toward intimacy, which is I fast, I pray, or you start looking at mechanism.
So both lead to a works-based mentality, right? I know it's not what he essentially was getting to, but what it gets down to is either it's not in God's sovereignty. That's not one of the answers, right? Which again is one of the critiques I've levied before. And he's confirming that it's not in God's sovereignty that someone can get healed. It's either one, I have to fast and pray and do more stuff, or two, I have to, go under this new other route of mechanism. Like what's the formula to make this healing happen? So either one's not good and either one's not the gospel.
And so that is what leads people into the occult, is they're going, how do I get more of the supernatural in my life? And I love the supernatural. You love the supernatural, but there's a difference between the supernatural and Jesus. And if you have to pick between the two, you pick Jesus every time.
And this, I mean, I can agree with him on this, that, you know, it's such weird language, not weird, maybe uncomfortable language. We talk about the supernatural because as Christians, be you cessationist or continuationist, we believe in supernatural things happening, right? Like Jesus being raised from the dead, raising himself from the dead. That's a supernatural thing. Like walking on water, oceans being split. Like these are all supernatural things that happen, and we believe in them. It's just when it's in this kind of context, some denominations maybe get a little spooky when you start talking about some of that stuff. So, but the point still stands, is that people are pursuing more experiences, more things, and if there's not good theology around it, people run off the rails. And that's what I've seen people in my own life. People that were believers with me when I was at Bethel, or that were after Bethel, that then have, went from Christianity to kind of like mysticism to New Age mysticism to the occult. And they've just kind of denounced Christianity altogether. So it is sad to hear, but it is healthy to hear from someone who's still an insider there, confirming the critiques that we've all been levying. All right, so this next piece is Elijah really laying out where things go south. So again, just a reminder, he's making this documentary called Send Proof. It was a documentary he decided to make based on a confirmation from a word he got from Sean Bowles that we later find out was a total scam because, Facebook profit. Before he pulls the money out, which is about $300,000 raised, and he had additional money that he had to pull out of his own savings, essentially drained his savings in retirement to make this video. There was then this interaction with an intern to Chris Valentin, one of Sean Bowles' intern, which we know. So these text threads are going to be familiar, but this text thread happens the day before he's going to start pulling money to make this video. So let's go ahead and watch this.
The irony of this is that on April 17th, 2020 is when Chris and this intern start this dialogue.
And just a heads up, what it says here is Mike is saying, I'll explain Sean Bowles' abuse of interns and employees in his next video. So there's more coming out, which we've talked about this. So Mike just doing his due diligence, and which keeps him so credible. So we appreciate that.
And the next day is when I'm pulling my money out. And so,
right. So to be clear, the whole scandal of Sean is brewing with the interns and abuse, essay stuff. And it's a day before he's about to pull his money out, and he has no idea about this. And Bethel knows that he has this prophetic word from Sean Bowles to make this video, and they know about it. And so this is what happens.
This is all your personal money beyond all the fundraising you did and the promises you made in the name of what Sean Bowles said. You're fundraising, you're telling people, look, the Lord is in this.
Yeah, and he's texting.
You're getting support from others for it.
Yeah, and he's texting them. I've told many leaders in our network about Sean's dishonest prophetic ministry. I told him he needs to clean up his mess before he can have a relationship with our people. I've told our entire team that they're not to minister. Right.
So all the insiders at Bethel have their entire team on blast to not affiliate, work, or do anything with Sean Bowles. Meanwhile, Elijah Stevens is pulling out his entire life savings, fundraising, and going full force into making this film as a child of the house at Bethel under Sean Bowles, and no one's telling him, hey, don't do this. No one's giving him the red flag or the stop sign of like, just hold off on this. Don't do this. No one's telling him.
Right.
What on earth? Yeah. And so, this is in May 2021. So 3 years later, which is I launch in September 2021. Someone reaches out to me. He's a producer, and he said, I showed him my movie, and he's like, Sean Bowles is in this. No one tell you? So I'm finding out about this for the first time. Someone outside of the States that I would not have ran across had it not been for Providence at some level.
So imagine you're in his shoes, right? You're months down the road from this. You finally pull the trigger. You do this. You make this film, and from someone who's not even from Bethel, actually outside the states, confronts him. And it's like, hey, you made this film. Sean's in it. Anyone tell you what's going on with Sean? Like, and this is years before all the news broke publicly. So there was plenty of insiders and people that knew about what Sean was going on that weren't even at Bethel. And as someone who was an empowered leader at Bethel, who was hundreds of thousands of dollars into making this film, no one told him. They just let him move forward with it and basically ruin his whole, financial portfolio, life-saving setup. And this is where it gets frustrating, is where people are like, well, you should have stewarded the word better. You should have, followed the prophetic word better. This guy is a perfect example of someone who followed the prophetic word about as good as you can follow it, right? I mean, he did everything. And it's not a failure of him stewarding it. It's the fact that it was a false prophet that gave a word. Big difference. All right, this is going over the quotes. This is where it gets really good. And Elijah starts pulling out quotes from books by Bill Johnson, by Chris Valentin, of their standards and how they expect other people to operate. And this is in regards to prophetic culture and prophecy. So Elijah just kind of, again, Elijah's rebuke is honestly very unique because his rebuke is within Bethel's standards, which makes it so strong. This is what makes this stand out more than any other rebuke or call to repentance that any critique has been levied against Bethel. He's doing it not just by biblical standards, but by the very standards that Bethel has set. So watch this.
As prophetic cultures require that every prophetic declaration is judged and scrutinized for its authentication and application. The spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. Therefore, everyone's personally responsible for their prophetic words. And
just full stop there. The whole everyone's personally responsible for their prophetic words. That's where a lot of that language comes from. It's like, well, you were given the prophecy, so it's your job to steward it. So that's where that standard comes from. But watch what Elijah does with this.
That's the time to call foul ball. It's time to say, my duty that I proclaim in my book is to protect you and our culture. And they sat on that until it was forced up.
And this is it right here. Like, and he says, my duty, he's talking about Chris Valentin. He's saying this is what Chris Valentin said his duty is to call balls and strikes as a ref in the prophetic culture that he's created, and he's not doing it. This is the critique that he's levying, and he, it's a bit more personal for him, obviously, because it cost him his life savings. So you have a place that's boasting to be the hub of modern prophecy, to be the boast the school of the prophets and how to prophesy, teach people how to prophesy. And it's like, well, no, we have ways to keep people in check. We have ways to hold people accountable. And you have a guy, Elijah, who believes in the gift of prophecy for today in the way that's being exercised here. And he believes that we can have prophets, and he believes in the accountability of prophets. But the very guy who literally wrote the book on it isn't following his own standards. And this is the critique he's levying. If you're going to write the book on accountability for prophets, hold the prophets accountable. And it's hard to see. So for sake of time, again, trying to keep this as succinct as possible. There's so many good points in this whole video, and I encourage you guys to watch the whole thing. It then goes through Elijah going to confront Sean directly, provides email proof, evidence of all that. That's around the hour 19, hour 20 mark. He goes through essentially breaking down, okay, I'm going to try to, rather than, do hearsay, he's going to do the biblical thing and go directly to Sean. And Sean, kind of makes him feel better about it, kind of dispels any rumors or worries. And then he keeps moving forward. And then we get to this next clip here where, again, he's referencing the School of the Prophets book by Chris Valentin. All right, so this is where then he goes from Chris Valentin, Sean Bowles, now he's going to Dan Fairley and confronting again and trying to figure out what is going on, because he's now knee-deep into this production, hundreds of thousands of dollars into it, trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
I go to Dan, and I'm like, hey, Dan, because Chris and I had this conflict and on Physics of Heaven, and so I don't write Chris back, because it's like, if you write that short of a sentence, you're not wanting to have a conversation, and so I asked.
It's socially obvious that that he's out. That's all. I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. So I mean, he's my closest leader, and I'm like, hey, I had this thing with Chris, and this guy told me about sending over some evidence, but he didn't want to send it to me. And so I'm like, have you heard anything about this?
So now he's confronting other leaders about, hey, have you guys heard anything going on about this Sean Bowles stuff? This poor guy is getting all the information from everyone but his leaders, who are saying to be the prophetic referees to help people in line, and he's not getting any information from them. So now he's having to confront them after being sent evidence and information about it. So it's a tough spot to be in.
He's like, no, I'm a senior leadership team member. Like, of course I would have heard it. And so
this is revealing though, because it's like Chris said his whole team. I didn't know, but Dan didn't know. Dan is a major pillar in Bethel.
I'm just telling you, it's seared in my mind. And so
now this is big. Now, I would like to think that maybe Dan didn't know and that he's not lying, but from what Chris is lying, he didn't tell his whole team. So you have two options here. You have one where Chris is lying. He didn't tell everyone. He kept it to himself, acted like he told everyone. Or two, he did tell everyone, and Dan is hiding this directly from Elijah. Either way, it's not a good look for Bethel.
Like, I'm like, well, can you follow up about this? And he's like, sure. And so a few weeks go by, nothing happens. And I like go back to him. Have you talked? No. And so I just start reasoning, well, maybe some wires got crossed with this producer. And this happens all the time, by the way, is I'll hear a story, I'll think something happened, and it's just something's off. And I'm not saying that guy lied to me, or I even thought he lied. It's just normal in a culture that large for wires to get crossed.
So he's being so generous. And it's like, you can see his heart in this. Like and if you haven't watched the whole thing, again, the very end, in my opinion, the last like 20, 30 minutes, where Elijah basically goes through a call to repentance, for Elijah, for Bill, for Chris, for Sean Bowles, go to it. But let's jump to the next portion here, which is, Bill and Sean evidence dispels his concerns. So you'll know exactly what I mean when I show this to you. All right, so poor Elijah's getting the ringer here, trying to figure out what's going on, and he's trying to figure out, is this true? Are the rumors true about Sean being a false prophet, about being a Facebook prophet? And so he's going to break down how his concerns actually get dispelled of that, and it's basically getting set up to fail, the way Mike puts it.
And I go through, and I'm seeing like pictures.
There's Sean Bowles of Sean Foyt. If you don't know, Sean Bowles was on the board of Sean Foyt. Sean Foyt was on the board of Sean Bowles. Lots of interesting stuff there.
Pictures of him and Sean from 2020. Also, I'm seeing pictures of him and Chris and Sean.
So everyone's ministering with Sean, right? Cheon knew about it. Bill knew about it. Chris knew about it. But everyone's ministering with Sean. What's going on here?
Which in 2020. And so it's giving me this impression that maybe whatever happened in 2018, 19 has fixed itself.
So that's it right there. So because of everyone else is still ministering with Sean, why would this guy not think everything's okay? Right? This poor guy is like, well, I mean, everything must be okay because everyone's ministering with him. And this is where, it kind of came all crashing down, unfortunately. All right, so now it's to the point where the film's getting released. It's about 2025 in the timeline, and Elijah's trying to figure, okay, is Bethel going to help me promote this thing? Because they just showed evidence of Bill Johnson with Sean on TBN, Sean Bowles, and everyone's still affiliating with Sean. Everyone's still doing stuff with Sean. So why can't they promote the documentary with me? And so as a member of the house, as a leader at the house, and as someone who's, heavily involved at Bethel, it seemed like it'd be a no-brainer, right? They play like Darren Wilson's Finger of God. He doesn't even go to Bethel. All these people. And so it seemed like it'd be a no-brainer to show this film for him. And this is where we pick up.
But you got to wonder why you were just left out in the dust. Your film, everybody's celebrating it and all this stuff, but they're not going to do it.
And the story I was told is, oh, we don't want to launch a documentary every few months. I'm like, we're not launching documentaries every few months. And so, and after I left Bethel in August of 22, they showed Aaron Wilson a few months later. And so, like, it's if you're calling yourselves fathers, like, there's no father that doesn't sit his son down and go, this is what you need to do. This is how to have success. You've put your whole life into this. And it was pretty miserable going through that time and the rejection, and yet still trying to push something out. And like, I felt set up to fail, just to be honest.
It's terribly sad. So they basically canceled airing you can watch the full thing with Mike Winger, you'll see it. They canceled airing the movie at Bethel. They gave him basically a lame excuse as to why, and then aired Darren Wilson's afterwards. And to his point, they keep boasting these roles of spiritual fathers, spiritual parents. He's like, but you're not acting that way. And again, these critiques are really good because he's coming from the inside and speaking the language of the culture, which goes a lot further. So, and there's more. Let's keep going. All right, this next spot's a gut punch. So this whole time this has happened, you have this guy from Bethel making a film in light of Bethel, trying to help prove that Bethel's true, be an advocate for Bethel. And then the only thing he's trying to figure out what's going on. He's trying to dispel the rumors, trying to get answers from leadership, not really get much of anything. They don't even support his film, but he's still holding on to his prophetic word of, like, to his credit, he's like holding on to this word as something that can still happen. And then he finds out and realizes that the bit of information that he thought was so unique and hard to find, he then realizes was on Facebook. And that's when this whole thing for him falls apart and he realized, I was duped.
The one thing that you can hang on to is you have some aspects of what Sean communicated that, to your knowledge, he couldn't have data mined. This is one thing you've been clinging to this whole time.
Yeah.
This whole time.
Yeah.
It's been like in the back of your mind, you're like, I looked it up, I tried to find it, I couldn't find it. And then, sadly, is your wife that found it?
Yeah.
And so she shows you this, and I'll put it on screen for people to see. The word that Sean gave that you couldn't find was in just a photo from Facebook.
And I don't know.
So all this whole thing about Silky that they thought was so unique, it was right there on Facebook. And yet again, Sean's false prophecy, his destructive habits, and taking the Lord's name in vain gets yet another victim in Elijah. And he is now hundreds of thousands of dollars life savings into this, and he's realizing it's like the there's a guy named Jesus who talked about this once about building your house upon the rock, upon the sand. That's kind of what this is in a way. It's like he built this whole thing on sand, and the whole thing came crumbling down, and he's just like, I don't know what to do with this, and it's terribly sad. And this next part, honestly, I was almost mad when I saw it. I mean, it's honorable for what Elijah's doing here, but it's also infuriating, if I can use that word. Elijah apologizes, and I had to include this because it's just incredible. You have Bethel, who is denying accountability, denying even holding their own standards that they've written books on how to prophesy and hold prophets accountable, and then you have Elijah, the one who is wronged, who then apologizes. So let's just watch that real quick.
And so I want to apologize. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why we missed this, and I want to apologize to our backers, people that supported me. And I was naive, perhaps overconfident in my ability to check, and I wish I'd hired some type of private investigator, and I'm asking for your forgiveness. And Sean had looked me up to the best of my knowledge, and I wouldn't have ran a Kickstarter if I'd known that. And I told people I thought this was from God, and I spent years of my life, showed it around the world, and I am very sad by my failure. And I've dishonored the name of Jesus. And I ask you as my audience and friends and family to forgive me. And I'm sorry for breaking your trust. And yeah.
Unbelievable. I just can't believe this. Like, how messed up is this in church today? That you have a man who was, by all accounts, absolutely wronged, and he's the first to apologize. Why is it that the church does this the worst? Like, I don't understand. Like, we should not be this bad at this. Why? I don't get it. And Elijah is really setting an example. And I would note this is evidence, in my opinion, of the Holy Spirit working in a man's life. To have something this crazy happen to you, and your response on a channel with almost 1 million subscribers is to apologize to people. Like, he's not after his pound of flesh. This man is not vindictive. He's not trying to seek downfall in anyone. His heart is repentance and restoration. If that ain't the Holy Spirit working in someone's life, I don't know what is. Like, I know I would need the Spirit to empower me to do that, because my flesh would have a lot to say. It's insane. So, Elijah, if you ever watch this, man, just amazing, and so sorry, but also just way to set an example. Way to set an example. So now Mike talks about how all of this is so quickly washed into the culture of honor, and then we can't confront people and talk about it because we can't touch the Lord's anointed and all that stuff. And Elijah, again, man, this guy, like, I am blown away by his very good communicator for one, but also his ability to just, I would say, following the Spirit and really letting the Spirit empower him to have these really amazing responses. But he then really lays out the cost of all of this and what the consequences of this manipulative prophetic practice from Bethel is.
And let me tell you the consequences of this. Since December, like, my anxiety rests at a 5 to 7 or an 8 each day. I sleep 3 hours a night. I have contacted the VA, filed for disability. My psychologist wrote, a note saying that this will probably affect employment for me. And so this is a big deal. Like, the truth matters. And when you withhold it, you set people up for major injury. And if you're a leader or an apostle or a prophet or a teacher inside the renewal, is this okay with you?
And he's bringing up a valid point. Like, I mean, this is the critique a lot of people levy on this movement, is like, these people aren't acting like quote unquote apostles, right? This is not biblical, the way these guys are acting or carrying themselves. And this guy is still holding on to this and bringing these critiques in. It's crazy. It's like, man, like, I can't stress how incredible it is that he is, in his humility, still, like, again, a lot of these practices is what caused me to just leave the renewal charismatic movement and be where I'm at now. But he's still holding on to it. And now he's, by their own standards, trying to hold them to account. It's pretty amazing.
If you go to Bethel Leadership Network, is that okay with you? If you're a Bethel student or staff member, is that okay with you? Because if it's not, then you need to break the cycle of when these things happen and someone talks about it in public, is patting people on the back and being like, oh, you're suffering. What if you said, let's take the high road and get your integrity back? What if you said, what if you encourage people to start calling this stuff out? What if you started going public with stuff you knew? because I think we're at a point in the charismatic movement where we are on fire. God snuffed out IHOP, and he is pruning the church, and we're supposed to find out what God's doing and join him. And part of it's bringing holiness back, bringing integrity back, going back to the word. And we need a reformation right now, to like take the Bible seriously again as our functional authority, where if we disagree with it, it wins. And
I mean, what can you add to that? I mean, he's right. He's right. There's no other way to put it. He's absolutely right. The part that's hard in all this is as someone who's part of Bethel alumni groups and can see what alumni are saying about this, I can tell you right now, it's not the reactions aren't what you think. You know, I see these things and I'm like, it's so obvious. This is corrupt. It's awful. It's evil. It's wicked. People are still, as alumni, defending Bethel. Bethel alumni are still towing the line. They're not calling out the leaders. They're saying, oh, great, we're doing this again. Like, they don't even watch the video. They don't even want to know about it. So if you're thinking like, what this will definitely get Bethel people to change, it won't. It won't. Maybe some, but it's not a slam dunk. Even with all the evidence, it's not a slam dunk. They're still running in it. They still think it's okay, and they're just dismissing it. And I really hope and pray that Elijah will. I mean, be praying for Elijah. It's crazy to hear how much this has ran through his life, but please be praying for him. And I hope that moving forward, he's right. I'll just say that much. All right, we're nearing the latter half of the video now. And again, I'm trying to make this as succinct as I can for you guys. And I can't stress enough, go back and watch it. But we get to a section where he's actually given a message to Bill Johnson. And he basically says he's convinced that Sean's a false prophet just as much as Bernie Madoff did a Ponzi scheme. Like, basically, it's without doubt. And he brings up a really good point that many of us have brought up before on other channels like, Long for Truth, Roseboro, Kozar. A lot of these guys have brought up. But how 1 Corinthians 5 is in play now, and his breakdown's really good. I think as an insider at Bethel and someone who still wants Bethel to succeed, it's important that we hear his perspective on this.
1 Corinthians 5 and 6 comes into play. And in that, Paul is writing to the church at Corinth about this guy, and he was a member of the church, and he had sexual relations with his stepmother. And Paul is like, what are you guys doing? This dishonors Christ. It dishonors the reputation of the people of God, and it's harmful to this man's soul, and you guys are okay with this. And so in writing this letter in chapter 5, verse 9 through 11, he says this: I wrote you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people, not meaning people of this world who are immoral or the greedy or swindlers or idolaters. In that case, you would have to leave this world. And so he's saying, hey, this isn't for people outside the church. But
this passage is so important, and it's one of the ones that I use a lot when people are saying, like, why are you judging people? It's like, I'm not. Paul made it so clear that amongst the church, we need to make sure we are presenting a pure bride. And this is such a good passage for it.
He goes on to say, now I'm writing to you that you must not associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister.
Claims to be a brother or sister.
Sean claims that. But is sexually immoral, greedy, an idolater, slanderer, drunkard, or a swindler. Do not even eat with such people. And the Greek word, I'm going to say this wrong, harpax, which is translated swindler, describes someone who's greedy and deceitful, exploiting others through predatory or dishonest means.
Dang. It's like a mic drop moment, right? Like, it's such a good point. taking advantage of people through predatory means. Yeah. That's been the past like year of scandals in the charismatic church. And this guy is still inside calling it out.
And what I am saying is fake prophecy is swindling because it opens people up to financial contracts. It opens them up to speaking engagements. It helps them sell books at the expense of others. And what I am claiming should be done is in the same way, a type of church discipline that Paul had for this man, it should happen to Sean.
That's a great point. And it is so true. And again, his heart is restoration. His heart is for people to be restored and to people be brought back to Christ and to not be consumed in their sin. There's one last thing I want to go over, and it's actually something I was so surprised when he brought up, but I thought it was so good because I've been saying this in my friend circles and to some people, my friends online, for years now, and he so succinctly lays it out. So I want to go over this part, and next will be the last part. So Elijah's talking about how in the early 1800s, many of the renewal movement that was going through with some of the early revivalists really fell to exploration of the occult. And he's going to give a really good example here, and he's going to, it's pretty clever what he does.
And I want to tell you about a revivalist in the 1800s. His name was Joe. And he started using seer stones, which is in the, people in the Old Testament sometimes use seer stones. And so he would use it to kind of like find treasures and stuff. But he also had a passion for revival and the things of God. And so he's just opening the door a little to what we'd call the occult. And so Joe starts just praying, crying out to God. And when I think he's 14, he has a vision where he sees Jesus and he hears, "This is my son who I love." And Jesus tells him not to join any existing churches, quote, because they draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They teach doctrines of the commandments of men, having a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. Later in his life, he sees an angel, and the angel's like, "Hey, up on this hill is a book. And if you dig it up, what you'll find is like someone buried it, and it's got teachings about Jesus in it." And so he digs it up. Dude starts a 5-fold ministry. He's got prophets. He's called an apostle, teachers. He sees healings, has visions. And my fear is if he kind of worked next to you, Chris, for 20 years and was like, "Hey, can you write a foreword to my book?" And you'd be like, "Cool. Yeah, I love you." But the problem is Joe is Joseph Smith.
I mean, it's a pretty good point, and many people have pointed out the parallels of charismatic churches and Mormonism, and this is a great point. And he's talking to Chris Valentin here in this last part, saying, "Chris, you would endorse him, you would move forward with this."
And that book is the Book of Mormon. And this happens again and again and again in church history. It happened in the Renaissance when people found the Hermetica. And so what they're doing is they're going back in church history or back in pagan history, and they're finding really cool stuff. Like, this is how we do paintings, and it helped the Sistine Chapel. This is how we do architecture. Great. And then they find this magic book, and they start incorporating it into Christianity. And the true heart of the prophet is we don't syncretize at all. And so I don't have a problem with finding great architecture in pagan religion and incorporating it in the church. I think we have more beautiful churches today because someone learned how to do that. What I am highly concerned about is when we start bringing in those practices and Scripture's so clear, don't do that.
Elijah, you nailed it, man. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry that this is what you went through. And I really hope and pray that for your family, for you, for your mental health, for your anxiety, I hope everyone here can pray for you as well. And yeah, it's just a heartbreak. So I hope you guys have found this helpful. Trying to do a breakdown of this more succinctly, more clear. And these are the points that I thought stood out. I'd encourage you to watch the whole 3-hour interview if you have time. And hope you guys are blessed by this. Thanks for sharing, Elijah. Thanks, Mike.